Now, to look at the factors behind the persistence of employment at low wages, it's useful to start on the labor supply side. To make a long story short, the poor lack schooling years and training, and as a result, they bring a narrow human capital base to the labor market. And on the labor demand side, the industrial transformation taking place at the moment shows services outpacing industry, while agriculture declines. The sectors and subsectors that are emerging require skills that the poor members of the labor force do not have. These are in services like retailing and wholesaling, the SM, the Robinson, the Gallerias, etc. Telecommunications and transport, the Globe, the Smart, etc. Finance and insurance, as well as information technology, what you see going up along Commonwealth near UP, and then healthcare services. And lacking skills, the poor cannot master the production techniques required by these emerging sectors. Meanwhile, in the course of economic development, low-wage, low-skilled jobs in agriculture, manufacturing, and construction are also being extinguished. They are being destroyed. So what will happen to the unskilled? They become either unemployed. First, they migrate to the urban areas if they're coming from the rural areas, and they become either unemployed or underemployed in informal jobs like hawking, vending, watching your cars, and the like in the big city centers. So the poor, without any skills, end up with high turnover rates if ever they get employed, and then they go through long unemployment spells once they are dehired. The poor end up filling up jobs at the bottom of the occupational ladder. The daily wage in real terms of the highest occupational grouping, namely the government and private sector executives, is at least 4 times that of laborers and unskilled workers. And this wage differential has persisted over long periods of time, and it seems to be widening over time. In 2004, this real wage ratio was about 4.2. In 2006, this went up to 4.6. And so in the aggregate, labor share of the national income has not improved much. The ratio of compensation of workers to gross domestic product using national income accounts data is on the average only 0.24 or 24%. And the rest goes to producers' income. Although some of the producers' income, you can assign that to labor income, since some of the entrepreneurial income is a return from one's labor inputs. Still, labor's income share is low given the country's stage of economic development. And this distribution of income may be explained by, for one, relative factor supplies, which has, again, demographic roots. Labor in the Philippines remains the abundant factor of production, and as a result, draws a lower share of the national income. In addition, as the economy undergoes transformation through time, and manufacturing declines in importance, with some sectors and subsectors in services gaining prominence, we see that the average real wage of the employed in emerging service jobs is not able to compensate for the average real wage of the extinguished jobs. And furthermore, the preponderance of unskilled workers among the employed also dampens labor's income share. And so, employment at low wages persists, and poverty incidence remains high. It's a perfect economic storm the poor face. They're caught in a low-wage, low-skilled jobs. Then you add prohibitive land values and consider the limited and segmented housing market. And the unwanted outcomes are many and well observed. Squatting on idle lands is pervasive. The poor tend to live in hazardous and unhealthy sites with adverse environmental outcomes. Now, some of the poor choose to become entrepreneurs. They become self-employed, or what we call own account workers. One problem is the self-employed and the own account workers have limited access to financing. They face a high fixed cost of bank credit and are likely to be rationed out of formal bank credit. The result, enterprise growth is hampered with low returns to any investment that the self-employed make, and many of them end up with subsistence revenues. Now, is contractual overseas employment escape out of poverty for the poor? It is not, since this type of employment, overseas employment, screens applicants with test of skills. And unless they acquire those required skills, then they won't be able to get an overseas employment. At the same time, we know that there are high fixed costs, the job placement fees for one, that the poor can hardly afford. So what can be done to turn the tide in the fight against poverty? The answers are many, but the most urgent are widely understood, and some of them have been mentioned by Dr. Balisacan. It's very important to reinstitute an active population management program. I say reinstitute because we've had one in the past, except some administrations choose to ignore it. I think it's very important, since all the policy approaches are already well known and well understood, it's the institutional reforms that are indicated. To slow down the population growth rate, an active population management program spearheaded by the national government is crucial. And it must be in partnership, this program, with local government units and civil society. Next, let's scale up investments in quality education and healthcare. To produce skilled and productive workers able to master the advanced production techniques that continue to emerge in an era of globalization, investments in education, and other forms of human capital like health must be stepped up. For the poor, this has to start at the preschool level. Education then becomes a lifetime, and if you don't get the proper schooling, it's very hard to move up the education ladder. And since new production techniques keep on emerging, so unless you go into a lifetime education program,